Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. This is a warm welcome to the webinar 2 on the Good Practice Database. Today's topic is on integrating agendas, how to align SDG and NDC implementation at the country level. We will first give a brief overview on today's webinar's agenda. First, the welcome and a few notes on housekeeping. Then we will give a brief introduction of the Good Practice Database, followed by 2 presentation of good practice examples, a country example from India, the Chandigarh Solar City project, identifying synergies and maximizing the co-benefits of NDC SDG linkages in climate policy. And we have the pleasure to welcome Anchal Pruti for this presentation. And we have a second country example from Mongolia, aligning Mongolia's NDC and SDG through its national green development policy. And here we have the pleasure to welcome Topatrak Tumenyagal to introduce this case. This will be followed by a question and answer session and a brief outlook. My name is Dennis Tenzler, Director of International Climate Policies at Adelphi. We are supporting the Good Practice Database here with our team, and I will guide you through this webinar today. As in addition to the welcome, and we have a few elements on housekeeping. If you face any technical difficulties or you have some questions, please enter a question via the Q&A function, which you will find in this as part of this overall Zoom channel. And we would like to let you know that this there's a video recording of this webinar with the presentations also will be made available afterwards on the PATPA website following the webinar. So PATPA will be available at transparency-partnership.net. So there you can find afterwards again this webinar. As an introduction, we would like to make you a little bit more familiar with the Good Practice database, which serves as a central hub for a number of case studies on learning and leadership in climate action. Basically, 3 elements that you can that we offer with the Good Practice database. The GPD is an easily searchable repository of good practice examples, and this includes, on the one hand, cases where climate action is being effectively designed and implemented, and second, cases in which countries have overcome obstacles to implementation. This GPD is jointly established by the Transparency Partnership, by the NDC Support Cluster, UNDP NDC Support Program, the Let's GP, and the NDC Partnership. So a rich collection of partners. And the full content is accessible through all partners' websites. So you will be able to enter this GPD from different angles. What you will be able to find in the Good Practice database are around 200 case studies from across the globe and profiles. So there's a variety of sectors, schemes, implementation stages in different languages, English, French, and Spanish. And in order to facilitate the searchability of the Good Practice database, we have various tags that you can use. So from a country or regions perspective, from action areas, planning implementation activities, or you can also enter the GPD with respect to different sectors and schemes, barriers that need to be overcome, success factors, but also, as I mentioned, languages. So who actually develops the GPD case studies? The Partnership on Transparency and the Paris Agreement, or with the acronym PATPA, widely known, the UNDP NDC Support Program, the NDC Support Cluster, they all support the expansion of the GPD through a joint analysis coordinated by the GIZ and UNDP. So currently there are up to more than 50 new case studies available that are already available or will be available shortly developed by an overall project team led by Adelphi with New Climate Institute, Libellula from Peru, the Energy and Resources Institute, Terry from India, and CSE from Senegal. So let's start to move our attention to the first country example in India, the Chandigarh Solar City project. Actually, one partner of the Chandigarh from the Chandigarh Renewable Energy and Science Technology Promotion Society, CREST, was about to present this case study. Unfortunately, he's not able to be with us today, but with Anchal Pruthi from Terry, working there in the Earth and Science and Climate Change Division, and also co-author of this case study, we have a speaker who is very familiar with the case. She's presently working in the area of climate change policy, climate adaptation, climate finance, and sustainable development, and happy to learn more now about this interesting case from Chandigarh. So, Anachal, it's over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anchal Pruthi, and I work as a project associate with the Energy and Resources Institute. Today, I'll be presenting the case that I had prepared along with my colleague, Ms. Kavya Bajaj, on the Chandigarh Solar City case. So to begin with, and to familiarize you with the sectoral contribution to the GHGs, this is a pie chart which depicts the sector-wise contribution to the GHG emissions in India for the year 2014. As you can clearly see that energy sector has the highest contribution of about 73% to the GHG emissions. And if we go further down to the energy sector, we observe that electricity and transport are the highest contributors, with electricity contributing to about 42% of the in India's GHG emissions. So the government of India in this regard has taken up a number of initiatives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the electricity sector. One of the initiatives which was started by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in 2011 was the Solar City Initiative, or the Development of Solar Cities program. The objective of the program was to prepare, to support the urban local bodies in preparation of a roadmap which guides the cities in becoming a renewable energy city, or particularly a solar city. All the cities, all the solar cities that come under the purview of this program have a target to reduce their projected energy demand by about 10% in the first 5 years. And this was basically done through a mix of measures like increasing the renewable energy mix, adoption of renewable energy technologies, and adoption of energy efficient measures. And so far, 48 cities have been given approvals to be developed as solar cities under the program. Now, coming to why Chandigarh fits well within the Solar City program is mainly because of two reasons. Chandigarh has been witnessing an increasing trend in the population, which has led to a rise in the per capita consumption of electricity. And if we compare the per capita consumption of electricity with the national average, it's considerably high if we compare it with the national average for Chandigarh. Also, the city doesn't really generate any electricity on its own and is dependent on the adjoining areas for the electricity transmission. Therefore, it becomes imperative for the city to reduce its dependency on the central grid by generating power from the renewable energy sources. For the institutional arrangements, the nodal agency responsible for the implementation of the Solar City Chandigarh program is the Chandigarh Renewable Energy and Science and Technology, CREST. The funding, as I've highlighted earlier, is being received from the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy under the India's Solar City program, and the distribution company involved is the Chandigarh Electricity Department. As a part about the activities, the first activity which was conducted under the program was the preparation of a master plan. It was a robust and comprehensive plan which was designed by Terry in 2012, and it basically it lays out a roadmap to guide the executing agencies towards effective implementation of the models. Some of the activities that have been suggested and are being implemented under the program include installation of solar panels on the landfill sites, and the use of solar. I'm sorry, this went away. Yeah, and the use of solar lighting and cooking devices in villages. There's a solar city cell which is housed in the nodal department, which is responsible for identifying sites and the implementation of solar projects. As a part of the program, a lot of awareness raising activities are being carried out to promote solar energy and other activities. And there's a MRV system that has been established under the program, under which the project developers have the responsibility of updating information on the website for each of the plant that has been installed. Coming to the barriers were mainly faced by the residential consumers, which has basically led to a slowdown in the uptake of solar panels in the residential sector. The first barrier being that there are no loan products or easy financing options available for residential consumers to bear the high upfront cost of solar installation. There is a subsidy available under the program, but obtaining these subsidies is a time-consuming process, which makes it really unattractive for the residential consumers. To reduce this burden on the residential consumers, CREST has basically impaneled vendors to install rooftop SPVs, which has shifted the responsibility of procuring subsidies from the consumer to the vendor. And it has also created an online subsidy portal, which basically eases out the process of obtaining regulatory clearances and subsidies. The second barrier that has been faced by the residential consumers is with regard to the electricity tariff. There's a net metering system which is in place under the program, and the consumers can basically pool in the surplus electricity to the grid. But the tariff which has been received on pooling in that surplus subsidy is pretty low. So the JERC had revised the power purchase cost, and there are promotion activities being carried out to increase the uptake of the program in the residential sector. Coming to the impacts of the activity, as of October 2018, 31,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent have been reduced. There have been savings on electricity bills to the amounting to about 3.4 million USD, which have been made by consumers on electricity bills. Also, Chandigarh is prone to experience frequent power shortages, so the introduction of solar energy has alleviated this burden on the grid, and it has also contributed to meeting of the renewable purchase obligations of the state. Um, in terms of the good practices, while preparing the master plan, a collaborative approach was adopted, which involved key stakeholders such as line ministries, urban local bodies, and discoms. Um, There was a technological innovation which was a part of the program. So Crest had basically set up a 10 kilowatt power floating SPV at the Thanas Lake, which is providing power for aeration of the lake. The innovation that was there in the program was that it was technologically innovated to produce 30% more power in comparison to the conventional SPVs. And the program has led to a lot of has contributed to meeting a lot of SDGs and NDC targets. And Terry had basically created a mapping uh, to map the activities with the adjoining NDC and SDG targets. One of the examples is shown in the slide. So the provision of solar power, for instance, can help contribute to meeting of the NDC, the third NDC target, which is reduction in emission intensity of GDP, and also contribute to reduction in non-fossil fuel installed capacity. So this can clearly help in achieving benefits like use of clean energy, reduction in emissions, and improve health, and subsequently contribute to SDG 7, which is increasing the affordable, reliable, and modern energy, as well as reduce adverse per capita environmental impacts on the city level. Coming to the success factors, one of the major success factors that contributed to the uptake of the program, especially in the residential sectors, was the creation of the online subsidy portal. Secondly, all the strategies that were suggested under the master plan were based on an extensive scientific and case study analysis. Um, um, okay, so there were many identifiable co-benefits in the program, which have also led to the long-term sustainable nature of the program. And the master plan also sets out a long-term vision with clearly defined goals. The master plan has basically divided these goals into a short-term, medium-term, and long-term targets. In terms of the replication, um, so there are three suggestions. Firstly, the infrastructural, informational, and financial needs must be assessed before suggesting the interventions. This can make it more replicable. Um, and frameworks like the creation of the master plan was an evolving document. So such frameworks must be revised and evolved in line with the barriers that have been faced by all the stakeholders. And it should be noted that all countries, while devising their plans or programs, must adopt a co-benefit approach in the design phase itself, so that uh, the program becomes sustainable in the long run. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anshal Pruti, for a very interesting, insightful case study from India. And I also look forward to upcoming questions from all our participants joining this webinar. Before that, we also move our attention to another case study. The country example from Mongolia is here showcase how this country implemented an approach to align NDC and SDG through its national green development policy. To this end, we welcome Tubadak Dumenyagal to give his presentation. He is with the Department of Green Development Policy and Planning at the Ministry of Environmental and Tourism in Mongolia, and we look forward to your case presentation, and I will give you the floor. So Tumimagal, you can...
Yes. Yes. Good morning, everyone, and I'm Turbadr General from work as an officer of the Department of Green Development Policy and Planning at the Ministry of Environment and Tourism of Mongolia. Today, I would like to introduce the National Green Development Policy of Mongolia. So, the climate change is the global challenge with severe environmental and social and economic implications. In Mongolia, not only the natural ecosystems, but also key socio-economic sectors like agriculture, infrastructure, and health are adversely affected by alternating climate conditions. The frequency and magnitude of natural hazards, including harsh winter and drought, snow and dust storms, and flash floods are increasing, and thereby the climate change has tremendous impacts on livelihood of the local communities. An annual mean air temperature of Mongolia increased by more than 2 degrees Celsius since 1940, while an annual precipitation decreased by 7%, resulting in a higher aridity index. In addition to the drying landscape, rural and urban livelihood alike is very much affected by natural disasters and frequency and magnitude of which are increasing. So also the desertification and land degradation is the severe challenge for us. The almost 76.8% of the total area is affected by desertification at any level. So the main factors for degradation is climate and human activities. You can see that 51% of the main factors, 51% of the percent is from the climatic factors and 49% is from the human activities. So we have key challenges in pursuit of green development because of the poverty rate and resource-based economy and vulnerable to climate change and lag in technology, wasteful consumption and environmental pollution and desertification makes the habitat degradation and inefficient use of natural resources. Also, according to the UNESCO report that Mongolia is the domestic material consumption per GDP is 5 times more than the Asia Pacific average. And also for energy intensity is 7 times more energy than the global average. And the government of Mongolia has adopted national and sectoral strategies and policies which address sustainable development goals and climate change adaptation and mitigation issues such as national program on climate change and also green development policy and Mongolian sustainable development vision. So the green development policy is adopted in 2014 by the parliament, and it has 6 strategic objectives, and the implementing measures are adopted by the government in 2016, and you can see the indicators and targets. So, for example, we are trying to decrease the poverty level to 15%, which was 27.4% in 2013, and also we are trying to increase the share of renewable energy and total installed capacity of energy production. So here is as I mentioned before in my previous slide, that the green development policy has 6 strategic objectives. The first one is here is the goals of strategic objects. The first one is to promote resource-efficient, low-carbon production and consumption with emphasis on the waste reduction. The second one is to maintain ecosystem balance and reduce environmental degradation while intensifying reclamation activities and environmental protection. So the third one is to promote investment in environmental protection, human development and clean technology, and also leverage the tax credit and incentive mechanisms to finance the green economy. The fourth one is to promote green jobs and reduce the poverty and promote the green lifestyle. The fifth one is to make education and science, technology and innovation accelerators of the green development by promoting environmentally adapted style and cultural values. The last one is to plan and implement human settlement adapted to climate change and natural resources carrying the capacity. There are the gaps and barriers. The high priority of external barriers are the first one is financial lack is the most important obstacle. And the second one is challenge to introduce advanced and new technology and equipment, machinery and the products are important. So also we have, there is a weak management of disaster risks. It still exists, especially at local level, and early warning system for prevention of drought and flood, which cause the highest loss and damages. There is a high priority of the internal barriers are the lack of legal enabling environment. Also, there's a weak coordination and integration between sectors, insufficient human resource capacity, and also there is an ineffective monitoring system for natural resources, and incapable tracking and monitoring system. So the Mongolia's sustainable development and climate targets represent growing sustainable investment needs and opportunities. The total investment to finance the green development policy is estimated at $6.9 billion US. The targets of the nationally determined contributions, NDC are based on the National Green Development Policy objectives. In 2015, the government is estimated in NDC that we need the finance for mitigation measures is at least $3.5 million US, and for adaptation measures, we roughly estimated at least $3.4 billion US for the period from 2021 to 2030. So for the mitigation measures, we are also we need that international sources, especially for additional mitigation actions. And first of all, we first mobilize that internal funding and resources and seek support from the international communities for financial and technical and capacity building. For the government is working on to diversifying finance for climate change and green economy. So here is the financing mechanisms. The first one is public finance and investment. So the government is willing to spend no less than 2% of the gross domestic product of Mongolia will be allocated for green development. And second one is green public procurement. By 2020, we are trying to spend 20% of the public procurement will be the green public procurement. And also the government tax policy allows and incentives. And in terms of international finance, we are also working with the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, and Global Environmental Facility and other sources. And also one of the important mechanism is public-private partnership and private finance. So we are working with the Mongolian bank associations to support the sustainable finance initiative. Also, we are working on to establish Mongolian Green Finance Corporation. Regarding the sustainable finance initiative is one of the best good practices to invest the green development and also to invest the climate change actions. So for this initiative, the partners are following. First one is Ministry of Environment and Tourism, and second one is Mongolian Bankers Association, which consists of the local banks, and Bank of Mongolia, IFC, FMO, and Page's partnership action on green economic, which is the one of the program of United Nations Environment. So for the second one is Mongolian Green Finance Corporation. This one is that the key partners are readiness support by GCF and Government of Mongolia, which are Ministry of Environment and Tourism and Ministry of Finance. Also, there is a private sector and international partners, including Green Climate Fund and GGGI and United Nations Page program. So this corporation will help Mongolia to establish and operate a tool to green its economy and support the related policy implementation and collaboration with private sector players. Also, the green financing mechanism is the implementation of sustainable green banking practices, and those are all related to the National Green Development Policy and NDC targets. So, as I mentioned with that PAGE program, the government of Mongolia has implemented this, worked with the UN's implementing agencies for the partner to implement successfully the Partnership for Action on Green Economy from 2013 to 2018. We work with the PAGE for these 9 components, for example, the green jobs and policy support, and we developed that green development indicators. Also, we work with the NGOs to establish that sustainable finance, and also there is a green economy education. The government is just adopted that sustainable education action plan and green buildings. So in terms of national policy implementation through the international and bilateral cooperation, the solid demonstration projects implemented and initiatives are in place based on successful international cooperation mechanisms like Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, Global Environmental Facility, as well as bilateral cooperation arrangements with Japan, Germany, and other countries. So here is also one of the good examples. We worked with joint crediting mechanisms, and the real outcomes of the 4 projects, we reduced the GHG by 18,311 tons, and around 28,000 tons coals we saved per year, and 248 tons water we saved per year, and 59 jobs we are created already. So the government of Mongolia is striving to achieve collective impact in climate change associated with undertaking and integrate the collaboration among various stakeholders, adopting sustainable natural resources use management, and developing climate resilient infrastructure, and building capacities and mobilizing funds towards the low carbon and climate resilient green development. And thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation on how Mongolia is currently aligning the NDC and the SDG process, and then with the outstanding role of sustainable finance in this regard. I think what we were able to show with this 2 presentation is basically also kind of 2 different directions in how this alignment can take place. More the bottom-up perspective presented from Chandigarh case study, but also how important a top-down process is as outlined for the Mongolian context. So and now would like to and also thank you for our distinguished speakers and presenters to keeping the time. So we now have a question and answer session of roughly 50 minutes where we can enter into more details of these 2 interesting case studies. So if you have questions, please use the question and answer option as part of this Zoom channel, which is on the bottom of your screen, and I will be able then to come up with to direct some of the questions that are coming in via this channel. And I already have one first question with respect to the Chandigarh case study, which I think is pretty interesting. It tackles and thank you, Mahabum, always for this bringing this up. It's regarding the online subsidy portal that was mentioned as part of one key element to overcome the barriers. The question here is how this portal actually started in the beginning. Have there been an involvement of a local bank or a central, any kind of distinct governmental energy fund? That is one interesting question in this regard. On how to overcome one of the key barriers. So Anchal, I would like to invite you if you have an answer to this question.
Hi, thank you for your question. With regard to the online subsidy portal, the portal was brought into force because it, especially for the residential consumers, because availing those subsidies was a time-consuming task. So the portal basically reduced that hassle, and as of now, the portal is being managed by the state nodal agency, which is the CREST, and the subsidy is basically being provided by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for this clarification. We have also another question for the Mongolian context, which is that in the presentation there was a reference for the overall NDC implementation process, that there's kind of an international review there in place, also supporting further implementation. The question here is there some form of review for the SDGs, basically? So this would be for you, Mr. Tumenial.
Thank you very much for the question. So, I'm looking at I'm reading the question is from Fiona Ryan. Is there some form of review for SDGs? I'm not sure. I'm not sure about this question, but we are working on to finalize the NDC these days, and we will submit the NDC. Of course, the NDC and the National Green Development Policies aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. The government of Mongolia is willing to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals.
I think I assume that the question is also which heading a little bit into the direction which overall international partnership are there in order to inform the further implementation of SDG. I think it's pretty, as you outlined for the NDC process, and also to providing climate finance for the country. This is pretty much also a result of entering into a cooperation with international partners, with bilateral partners. You mentioned the joint crediting mechanism, and also looking at another question coming in here, how Mongolia is, or to what extent also Mongolia reflected on other experience in other countries by setting up this overall structure, which also I think goes a little bit into this direction. What kind of review input international cooperation is there, also with respect to SDGs? Maybe you can help us a little bit what in this regard, what is there in terms of cooperation structure?
Yeah, so there is you mean that the international cooperation with the international organizations. So the Ministry of Environment and Tourism is, of course, we are trying to work with the international organizations for achieving the SDG goals, SDGs, and also to protect the environment. And there is, we don't have like format. I'm not sure how to explain that, but we don't have like format structure that to work with the international organizations. But we all follow up and also follow the international regulations to work when we work with the international organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course, when we were working to develop the national green development policy, we studied about many countries from also get support from the international organizations to develop that green development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also I think as mentioned, Mongolia is also partner of those international structures, like also the NDC partnership. Probably also one important element in this overall structure of alignment process to get this kind of experience from other countries as well. Please feel invited to come up with further questions. On my side, I have also one for the another one for the Indian case, which I think is as a bottom-up example of how alignment of the NDC and the SDG process can be realized. I was wondering if you can highlight a bit or elaborate a little bit on the question as a bottom-up process, how much recognition this case received from the national government. So has there been any kind of support, as for example, as you outlined there, those the need for a dynamic process of setting up a flexible framework in order to continue the overall project, and are there any channels that you are aware of towards the national government of India in order to make clear this is actually supporting two quite important processes also for the Indian government?
So I think on the question of integrating both NDCs and SDGs, I would just like to say that since this is still an evolving process and India has started working on this integration, it will be very essential to include, to identify co-benefits and climate benefits at the design stage itself. And yeah, since the things are developing and progressing now, it will be in the long run, it will be easier for us to identify and synergize all of it and look at how they contribute to the NDC targets of India. And in terms of the recognition, I would just like to say that this case has definitely been recognized by the national government. In fact, in COP 2016, the Chandigarh Solar City was selected as one of the case to represent the solar theme. So yeah, it has definitely gained huge attention. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have another question for the Mongolian case study and in the overall context, which refers to how the green policy of the country benefit also women in terms of gender. So how this dimension is also reflected in this area. This is to you, Mr. Jumenjagal. Is there any how do you perceive the relevance of the gender topic as part of the green development that you just described? Is there are there any insights you can share? Probably not. I'm not sure, Mr. Diminigal, if you are can still hear us, and also maybe there is something that we also can follow up on, since we have the question, and also Gladys, that you brought this up, so we may follow up afterwards. So maybe to invite a last round of questions. Yeah, we have another one for Mr. Tuminyagal, but I'm not sure if he is still able to hear us. But just to present the question to all, that is on the mentioning of the Sustainable Finance Initiative, and what is interesting here is if this is also including a monitoring framework that is implemented in order to inform any kind of adaptation mitigation initiative, and also the proposals also to get financial support. If there's a framework, this is something. If this is something that can be shared, I think that is also a very important question, and probably also something that we can follow up. I'm as far as I'm aware, I guess we can also, those kind of information also are included in the case study, and that's probably something we can also follow up. In case Mr. Tuminyagal, you would like to come in on this, that you still hear us. If this is not the case, I guess we can follow up here, and after the Q&A session. Yeah, I just learned that Mr. Tuminyagal is unfortunately he dropped out of this session. But I think it's that we have those two questions on the gender dimension, and also about the M&E framework, and if there are chances to share this kind of framework. So I would suggest that we follow up here after the webinar. Which brings us to the, and thank you very much for all your questions, and we hope we have been able to address them together with our speakers, most of them, and also in most parts. Let's move over to the outlook, where we are with the GBT in the moment, and what you can expect, also in terms of additional webinars. There are two planned until the end of October. As we said in the beginning, recordings and presentations are available on the PADBA website. The date and the time for the webinars anyway will be announced in due course. You can also follow this process via Twitter or on the Transparency Partnerships website. The webinars 3 and 4 on the issue on presenting case studies from the good practice database will be on engaging the private sector for reaching the NDC targets on the one hand, and another one is on using innovative finance instruments for ambitious climate action. I think we learned a little bit also today from our two cases how important this aspect is for successful implementation, but that we will then have two additional cases as part of to give you some insights from the GPD in this context. For now, I would like to thank everybody for participation, also the colleagues to prepare this webinar, and then also our two speakers from India and Mongolia, and we would like to welcome you again for the next webinars. Thank you very much. And let's meet here in this webinar room again in due course. Thank you.